Since its debut in 1966, Star Trek and its spin-offs have depicted an optimistic future. However, that hasn't meant that the characters in the various series haven't experienced their fair share of suffering. In a well-crafted drama, characters are shaped by the conflict and suffering they've endured. Sometimes, though, characters in Star Trek have faced Shakespearean levels of suffering, heartbreak, and setbacks during their voyages through the cosmos. So, with that in mind, I'm Ellie with Trek Culture, here with the 10 most tragic Star Trek characters. Number 10. Marla MacGyvers. Depicted in the Star Trek original series episode Space Seed, Marla MacGyvers was the Enterprise historian. However, she was rarely called upon and spent much of her time painting portraits of forceful historical leaders. When the Enterprise encountered the 20th century sleeper ship Botany Bay and revived Khan Noonien Singh and his followers, MacGyvers was initially intrigued by meeting the kind of man she depicted in her artwork. She even convinced Captain Kirk to hold a formal dinner in Khan's honor. She fell in love with Khan. When he demanded absolute loyalty, she agreed to help him take over the Enterprise. MacGyvers balked when Khan's plans proved more violent than she could accept. She turned against Khan in time to stop Kirk's death and help retake the ship. When Kirk regained control of the ship, he decided to exile Khan and his people to Ceti Alpha 5. Kirk gave MacGyvers the choice of joining Khan in exile or facing a court-martial. She chose exile, and Khan enthusiastically accepted her into his company. As depicted in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, the explosion of Ceti Alpha 6 transformed Ceti Alpha 5 into a wasteland shortly after they arrived. Number 9. Dr. Timmerson. Depicted in the Next Generation episode Half a Life, Dr. Timmerson was one of the leading scientists on the planet Kaylon 2. He came on board the Enterprise D to test his plan for stabilizing his planet's sun. While on board the Enterprise, he met and fell in love with Lwaxana Troi. He expressed regret that he didn't meet her sooner as he was approaching his resolution, the ritual suicide performed by every member of his species that reach his age. When Lwaxana argued that he should reject the tradition, he initially refused, but changed his mind once he realized how close his plan had come to succeeding and asked Picard for asylum. When Picard granted the request, the Kaylon government dispatched warships to the Enterprise's coordinates and ordered them to attack if Enterprise attempted to depart with Timmerson. They also told Timmerson that because of his defiant stance, they would not accept any more transmissions about his project. Eventually, Timmerson's daughter came aboard and convinced him to honor their ritual. He agreed to do so, and after Lwaxana promised Captain Picard that she wouldn't cause any trouble, she was allowed to join him when he beamed down. Number 8. David Marcus. Introduced in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, David Marcus was the son of Captain James Kirk and the scientist Carol Marcus. David knew about Kirk, but they didn't meet until David was an adult. When Khan forced Chekhov, first officer of the USS Reliant, to announce that Starfleet was taking over Carol and David's Genesis project, Enterprise went to investigate. David initially attacked Kirk because he thought Kirk intended to seize Genesis. When Carol intervened, Kirk realized his attacker was his son. David was impressed by his father's courage during the conflict with Khan and apologized for misjudging him. In Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, David and Lieutenant Savick joined the crew of the USS Grissom to explore the planet created by the Genesis wave released by Khan. David was initially ecstatic about the planet's biodiversity, but soon learned a lesson in scientific hubris when he realized that the planet would soon self-destruct. David, Savick, and a resurrected Spock were marooned on the planet when Klingon Commander Krug destroyed the Grissom. When Enterprise arrived to retrieve Spock, Krug demanded that Kirk hand over Genesis or Krug would have one of them killed. David died protecting his comrades. Number 7. Mark Jamison. As depicted in the Next Generation episode Too Short a Season, Mark Jamison was a veteran Starfleet officer who, as a young man, was sent to negotiate the release of hostages on Morden 4, a world on the brink of civil war. Officially, the negotiations were successful. In reality, he had freed the hostages by giving weapons to the hostage-taker, Karnas. His attempts to even things out by also giving weapons to Karnas' rivals led to a 40-year war. Decades later, Karnas once again called for Jamison's assistance with a hostage crisis. Jamison was now confined to a wheelchair by a chronic illness. He was also using an age-reversing drug. After hearing about the hostage situation, Jamison took the rest of the medication and rapidly grew younger. Unfortunately, the drug was killing him. He told Picard about his part in causing the Civil War. Picard acknowledged Jamison's role while also stating the two sides could have negotiated peace at any time. When Jamison learned that Karnas had taken the hostages out of revenge, he led the rescue attempt himself. He died just as he confronted Karnas. Jamison's attempt at making things right impressed Karnas, and he released the hostages. Number 6. Maritza. As shown in the Deep Space Nine episode Duet, Maritza was a file clerk at the Galatep labor camp commanded by the infamous Gul Dahil. Years after the Cardassian withdrawal from Bajor, Maritza had plastic surgery to resemble Dahil. He then visited Deep Space Nine, where he received treatment for a disease that only afflicted survivors of a mining accident at the camp. Asserting that a Cardassian who served at Galatep must be a war criminal, Major Kira had him arrested. After an initial denial, Maritza admitted he was at the camp after being shown the results of a medical scan. He then insisted that he was really Dahil. When confronted with the fact that Dahil wasn't at the camp when the accident happened and had died years ago, Maritza broke down. He believed that if he were tried and executed as Dahil, it would force the Cardassians to admit their guilt. An emotional Kira replied that executing Maritza for Dahil's crimes would be murder and released him. Maritza was murdered as Kira and Odo escorted him to an awaiting ship. When the killer coldly stated that Maritza being Cardassian was enough motive, Kira angrily replied that it wasn't. Number 5. Demar. As depicted in Deep Space Nine, Demar was a Cardassian officer who rose to prominence during Gul Dukat's one-ship war against the Klingons. He then served as Dukat's adjunct when Dukat negotiated the Cardassian Union's entry into the Dominion. Demar succeeded Dukat as de facto leader of the Cardassian Union. However, Demar lacked Dukat's military genius and forceful personality and was little more than a figurehead for the Dominion. Dissatisfied with his lack of authority and his people's subjugation, Demar became an alcoholic womanizer. A surprise visit from Dukat reminded Demar that he was once a proud soldier. This, combined with being forced into an alliance with the Breen and the Dominion's casual approach to Cardassian casualties, pushed Demar to lead a rebellion against the Dominion. The female changeling responded by ordering Demar's family executed, but this only fueled his rage. Aided by Kira Nerys, Odo, and Garak, Demar quickly gained a legendary reputation among his people, inspiring a popular revolt. Demar was martyred, leading the assault against the Dominion headquarters. Garak and Kira honoured Demar's last orders to keep on fighting. They killed the last Wayun clone and captured the female changeling. Number 4. Tasha Yar. Tasha Yar, the first chief of security on the Enterprise D, grew up on the failed Earth colony Takana 4, a world plagued by civil war and violent crime. When a teenage Tasha escaped this hellhole and entered Starfleet Academy, she was inspired to become a security officer by the lawlessness of her childhood. Captain Jean-Luc Picard was so impressed by her bravery crossing a minefield to rescue a wounded colonist, he arranged for her to be assigned to his new command, the Enterprise D. Tasha served on the Enterprise D less than a year when she was murdered while trying to rescue Counselor Troy and Lieutenant Prieto from Armus, a smear of evil goo. When a severely damaged Enterprise C drifted through a temporal rift, it created an alternate timeline where Tasha Yar was still alive. This Tasha found herself serving during a protracted war with the Klingons. With Guinan's help, Tasha realized that she shouldn't exist. She then traveled back in time with the Enterprise C and helped protect a Klingon outpost from Romulans. She was taken prisoner and became an officer's concubine. Her daughter Sela became a high-ranking officer in the Romulan military and had a hand in several major events. Number 3. Hugh. Introduced in the Next Generation episode I, Borg, Hugh was a Borg drone who regained his sense of individuality after being rescued from a crashed Borg scout ship and disconnected from the Borg collective by the crew of the Enterprise D. When he returned to the collective, his sense of identity spread, leaving his cube in disarray. It was disconnected from the rest of the collective and left adrift in space. Data's brother Lore found it and took control of the drones, promising he would remake them in his image. Lore crippled many drones through horrible experiments. When Hugh realized Lore didn't have any idea how to fulfill his promise, Hugh led a rebellion against him. Hugh and his rebels later helped rescue Picard, LaForge, and Troy from imprisonment and free Data from Law's influence. As shown in Star Trek Picard, Hugh eventually became an ex-B, or ex-Borg, and a Federation citizen. He then became executive director of the Borg Reclamation Project on board the Artifact, a derelict Borg cube controlled by the Romulans. He was eventually coldly murdered by the Romulan agent Maritza during her search for the android Soji. Number 2. Kern. Kern was first introduced as Worf's younger brother in the Next Generation episode Sins of the Father. According to Kern, their father believed his stay at the doomed Khitomer outpost wouldn't last long, so he left Kern behind in another family's care. He also explained that their father was being accused of betraying the outpost to its Romulan destroyers. An investigation by the Enterprise crew revealed that Moog was framed by Duras, the head of a rival house whose father was the real traitor. Worf accepted discommendation, being legally stripped of his family honor to protect the Empire from the ramifications of the truth. Following Worf's instructions, Kern kept his true identity a secret. Their family honor was restored when Worf and Kern sided with Gowron during the Klingon Civil War. In the Deep Space Nine episode Sons of Moog, Kern informed Worf that because Worf opposed Gowron's recent actions, their family had again lost their honor. A demoralized Kern demanded that Worf give him an honorable death. Instead, Worf arranged for Kern's memory to be erased and his appearance altered so he could be given a new identity. Number 1. Captain Christopher Pike. Christopher Pike was originally depicted as the captain of the USS Enterprise in Star Trek's first pilot, The Cage. However, since this episode wasn't seen by TV audiences until 1988, his first appearance on the show was after he was severely crippled helping cadets escape their damaged vessel, showcasing his remarkable courage and dedication. Pike was reintroduced to TV audiences in Star Trek Discovery's second season, when he temporarily took command of the Discovery. During the course of the season, he was shown his future while visiting the Klingon planet Boreth to retrieve a time crystal. He was given the choice of leaving empty-handed and avoiding his fate, or taking the crystal and accepting it. He took the crystal as it was vital to his mission, although he remained troubled by his fate. In the Strange New Worlds episode Equality of Mercy, Pike considered changing his fate. However, after being shown an alternate timeline by a potential future version of himself, he learned that if he avoided his accident, his actions during a border crisis with the Romulans would doom the Federation to a protracted war, while actions suggested by James T. Kirk would prevent it. And that concludes our list. If you can think of any other tragic Star Trek characters, then do let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also head over to Twitter to follow us there, and Instagram as well, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with Trek Culture. I hope you have a wonderful day, and remember, to boldly go where no one has gone before.